Hello and welcome to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. I am your producer, editor Jacob. Your editor, producer Jacob, I don't know. Anyways, today the boys are talking about bias.
I'm risking a podcast without caffeine in my veins, so maybe this is the episode that you all turn into with if you have trouble sleeping. The dulcet tones of this bass voice. Cousin, we're going to talk about bias. A couple things maybe really fast. First of all, one of our listeners wrote in and compared us to Radovoy Korach. Am I getting it right? Did I pronounce it correctly?
Oh, that was very, very well pronounced, yes.
Oh, thank you. And Pistol Pete Maravich. We were on an interview recently where somebody mispronounced your name, and I was like, come on. Like, it's not that hard. I'd never heard of Radovoy Korach. So how about you tell us about this guy and why it's such a beautiful metaphor for our show?
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first Serbian and Yugoslav stars. So he had an incredible career. So this guy was big. His career was really in like 50s and 60s. Yeah, he was, I think, a small forward. Played. He's considered one of the greatest 50 basketball players in Europe. That's when the list first came out in the 90s. A bunch of tournaments are named after him. And yeah, just one of the best players. And I mean, he was good when Balkan basketball wasn't. So I think that's the other thing to understand. I mean, really, Balkan basketball started to dominate 70s and onwards. He was really the first superstar of the sport from Yugoslavia. And after him, he kind of held it down on his own, effectively. And then after him, it was really when the legends started coming in. He also died in a car crash, just like Dražen Petrovic.
Well, this is the thing that disturbed me about the metaphor, because Korach died in a car crash at the age of 30. Pete Maravich dropped out of a heart attack at 40. So I'm not sure what the listener was trying to get at, but I love I love the call out to an old Yugoslav star. And I mean, Pete Maravich, anybody who's played basketball who grew up in the 90s, like me, probably saw the Pete Maravich video that taught you how to dribble. And of course, started college for LSU. Played for the Atlanta Hawks, played for the expansion New Orleans Jazz, lots of connections there to me. So I get that. But let's not drop dead at the age of 40, please.
I do like our listeners, though, by the way. Thank you. That was a very, very nice analogy. And of course, the two of us love it.
We love it. Before we dive into bias, cousin, because I know you want to cook, President Trump has threatened 10% tariffs, or no, not threatened. He's imposing 10% tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland, and has threatened that they'll increase to 25% on June 1st unless a deal is reached for the complete and total purchase of Greenland. You got anything here?
Yeah, so actually, our cousin Matt Gherkin, who works with me at BCA Research, servicing investors and financial professionals, basically has a theory. And I don't want to just steal it from him, so I want to give him a shout out. His view is that the Supreme Court, this might be a tell that Trump is going to lose at the Supreme Court. And so we're all sitting here scratching our heads like, how stupid is this? Including Republican senators who have called it epically stupid, weapons grade stupid, and so on and so on. And look, the issue is that if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs, it will be that the piece of legislation President Trump used to impose tariffs, IEPA, can be used in national emergencies and so on. But the Supreme Court is going to say, well, there's no emergency. And he's going to say oh, yeah? And whips out the Greenland card, but what about Greenland emergency? And so it basically allows him to impose tariffs to the amount that he already agreed with Europeans on from Liberation Day. And so then everything is fine, And then he doesn't get Greenland. He's just like, cool, you guys don't want to give me Greenland? All right, I guess. So here's the tariffs in the amount that we agreed upon in our deals, even though my Supreme Court said that it's illegal.
Okay. Fascinating. And last thing to check in on before we dive into bias. I'm sure you saw the news about Prime Minister Carney going to Beijing and opening up a new strategic partnership with China. I made the mistake of calling him President Carney once in a piece that mentioned him like 10 times. And as I said on Twitter, hell hath no fury like a Canadian who reads an article by an American who calls him President Carney. Anyway, I know he's a prime minister. I thought that was pretty shocking, Marco. It's I took a victory lap on Venezuela a week ago. One of my other high conviction takes was that USMCA is going to get concluded without too much melodrama here by summer. I'm starting to think maybe I need to revise that. I'm not willing to lower my guns just quite yet, but I mean a pretty eye-opening move. You had Mark Carney high on your leadership board, and you have Canada high on your geopolitical power rankings. I less so. Do you think that Carney can actually get anything out of China? I mean, I think that Trump's been silly with this 51st state nonsense, but Canada's pretty well tied into the U.S. economy. It's you're not going to snap your fingers and have an economic partnership with China that's going to change that. But maybe I'm missing the fourth dimensional chess here.
No, I mean, I think it's just what I thought was interesting was that it was very powerful signaling. This is what we're telling countries they're supposed to do in the multipolar world. They're supposed to be geopolitically promiscuous, not because we want them to. It's not like we designed a Tinder app for geopolitics and want to profit off of promiscuity, but we do believe that in a multipolar world, you got to play multiple avenues, And so one of the things, if you look at it, what did Canada give China? An import of 47,000 EVs. Ooh, like the horror, So what I would say here is that I think that this is how you have to play checkers or chess or Lord of the Rings themed Risk with President Trump. Like you have to do something so you can take it away. So Carney, in Trump's mind, has now created a partnership with China, even though it was like just a nice visit. There's nothing wrong with having a nice visit. You lowered the temperature. Canada actually had a very bad relationship with China because of several Canadians that were imprisoned by the Chinese. So there was a lot. And then, of course, the Canadians arrested, I think she was the CEO of...
CFO, I believe.
CFO, yes, of Huawei.
Yeah.
Right. So, there were, actually, the Canadian-Chinese relationship was at rock bottom. And so Carney improved it. So in any other world at any other time, we would have just been like, okay, well done, and moved on. But I think that one way to interpret this is that Carney did something he can undo for a price. He did this so that he can have something to give to President Trump if the USMCA negotiations become contentious. So that's also another way to interpret this. But I think the other more obvious interpretation is that, even Canada is looking to diversify from America. So your point that Canada is very much tied to the US is obviously objectively correct. But the fact that even Canadians are not afraid of diversifying should really be a reminder to the US that it can be left bereft of allies. That is, yes, people are, and I go to Canada a lot. I am Canadian. I have family there. Most of my friends are there. And I can tell you that, nobody in Canada really, I mean, I don't want to say nobody, but the sense there is cool, we'll have a recession then. Okay, all right. Once countries have kind of survived pandemic, that they can do it again. And for Canada, unfortunately for Canada, it will be pandemic style, economic recession if they ever were to have a full out, trade war with the US. But the thing that I keep reminding everyone is that in a fight, to quote Al Pacino, it's the guy that's willing to die that's going to win that fight. From Any Given Sunday, shout out, the best speech ever. And the thing is, it's like Americans don't want to have the quality of their life impeded so they can like dominate Canada. Like no American's sitting there like, yeah, I'll take a pay cut to those Canadians. Whereas the Canadians, clearly because of the, little brother syndrome, because of sovereignty issues, because of national pride, because of obsession with being, cross-checked at young age, because of all those things, they're like, yeah, cool, yeah, we will have an economic recession. So I think that that's something to also keep in mind. I think Cardi's also playing another card here, which is that he would love President Trump to retaliate and then call an election and win a majority on the back of that upswell of pride.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is that I thought it was telling that when Trump was asked, I mean, earlier in the day, Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade rep, and a couple other folks in the Trump administration were asked about it. And they said, basically, Canada will live to regret this. This is not good. This causes problems. And when Trump was asked it on I think he was on Air Force One, I forget. He was asked this question. He was like, great, that's what Canada's supposed to be doing. Like, wonderful. They can make a deal.
But see,
make a deal.
That tells me that he thinks the way I do. And that he doesn't want to give Cardi anything, So he's basically saying like, not a big deal. I'm not going to give Cardi anything if he gives me something on this. Like, didn't happen, but also like, by the way, I mean, I respect that comment by Donald Trump because the president is saying like, yeah, it's a multipolar world, go make a deal. And he's also saying like, I'm about to make a deal with China, which is my big forecast for 26.
Yeah, I will just say, like, China able to sow the seeds of dissent in the U.S.-Canada relationship for the small cost of lowering some tariffs on canola.
Yeah, at 40. But again, what did they get back? They got 47,000, EVs. I think the other big thing though is that, look, if for all you Monroe Doctrine fans who discovered what the Monroe Doctrine means like 7 days ago, let me just tell you a couple of things. Conquering Venezuela, or like conquering Venezuela, we didn't really conquer Venezuela. The United States just like changed management. The board of directors is still the same. Like that's supposedly the Trump genius. His genius is the Monroe Doctrine. But like Canada is the most important part of the Monroe Doctrine, like the most important. It has all the natural resources you need on the planet. You don't need Greenland, for God's sakes. Everything Greenland has, Canada has like 6 times over. And it's right there. And it's going to send all of it to you, even though they probably should be building infrastructure. I mean, Canada should have been doing this for decades. It is an absolute travesty of both the Harper and the Trudeau administration that they did not build like massive infrastructure to export natural gas and oil to Europe and China, obviously. So the Canadians have a long tradition of just kind of subverting their interest to be friends with America. Brothers of a different mother. That's what the gates at the border between Vancouver and the U.S. state. It's like a very, very dramatic monument with like gates are always open. And so rather than celebrating Trump's genius on getting us like oil reserves, and by the way, if you're out there like drooling over oil reserves, you're probably also drooling over horsepower in a shitty Challenger. By the way, you're that guy. I just want to tell you right now, you're that guy. You're the guy who's like, how many horsepower does this car have? Yeah, that doesn't matter. If you're measuring which car is better because of horsepower, you're probably also drooling over Venezuela's oil reserves because you don't actually know how shit works. So anyways, to me, that's what's ironic here. Like President Trump, I don't want to say he's losing Canada, because he hasn't lost it yet, but he is endangering, let's put it that way, with his antagonistic and aggressive foreign policy, America's clearly strong ally that has everything the U.S. needs. But on the other hand, a lot of people are celebrating the acquisition of oil reserves that will never be converted into oil barrels as a great move in the Monroe Doctrine. And that to me is like silly. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know if you saw Steve Bannon like had a thing out there about how maybe Canada's the next Ukraine and going crazy. which is weird because Steve Bannon is many things. He's not stupid, and he's actually pretty geopolitically adept.
Going crazy. How so? I didn't understand.
Well, he called it the ticking time bomb north of the border, that it's not prepared, that it doesn't have the resources for the great game of the 21st century. Canada could be the next Ukraine with the Chinese Communist Party taking a bite. Let's leave aside the mixed metaphor there. I mean, just the whole episode on the like strategic insecurity of Canada and what's happening there, which President Trump is only furthering by doing this. The thing I just wanted to say was, I mean, if you go back to the 1920s and 1930s, which is a period that a lot of people like to compare the current period to, you and I are not on this team. We're on team 1890s multipolar. But you go back as recently as the 1920s and 1930s, both the United States and Canada had plans to fight each other. We had War Plan Red, to seize Halifax and Niagara Falls and Montreal and Quebec, and what would happen. The Canadians, I think it was Defense Scheme Number 1, seize like Seattle and Fargo and Albany and disrupt U.S. forces, all of which is just to say, I think Americans have taken for granted that one of the things that has led to the rise of the unipolar moment is that we have not had to worry about our northern or southern borders for over a century. One of the things that makes North America uniquely suited for geopolitical success is that you don't have some enemy that is bordering you that could do something to you, or even not an enemy, just somebody who wants to compete with you, who is not completely pliant and just wants to do whatever you want. So it's a pretty short-sighted way of thinking about things.
We could go on this forever, and I think that maybe we should revisit it. I will just say one thing to anyone who thinks that Canada can become the 51st state. Just remember, the only way to do that and retain America's uniqueness would be to enslave the Canadians. I just want to say that again. The only way to invade Canada, acquire its land, and retain the America First agenda would be to enslave the Canadians. You cannot give them the right to vote. Why? Because there's 40 million of them. That's a lot. And there is no conservative Canada. Let me say that again, very slowly for the MAGA camp. There is no conservative Canada. There is in the Canadian sense, but not in American sense. So on all the social justice issues, on abortion, on gun rights, on climate change, Alberta, which is the most conservative, most right-leaning province of Canada, scores on those issues the way Oregon does. So Alberta is Oregon. The rest of Canada is Vermont. And then Quebec, oh my God, buddy. It's French-speaking Cuba, you might as well say. So if the United States of America wants to acquire Canada, it then would have to be comfortable becoming a little bit more Canadian. It's not like Canada is going to become a little bit more American. It's the other way around, actually. And so, get ready for, universal healthcare. And, I have friends, conservative friends, who are like, no, bro, we'll do what Trump said. We'll divide Canada into two. No, you won't get 2 states unless you take some, villages in Alberta and give them statehood. I mean, I guess you could gerrymander Canada in an extremely undemocratic way. But my point is, it's just this is something that a lot of the folks in the MAGA camp don't understand. You would either have to ethnically cleanse Canada or enslave it. And so at that point, you're no longer America. So if you're America and you want to be America for a long time and believe in democracy and freedom and human rights and universal justice and all this shit, and then you want to take Canada as a 51st and 52nd state, bro, get ready to, wait in line for your healthcare, buddy. Eh? Hey, bud.
Well, that's about as good a segue as we can get into a conversation about bias. Where do you want us to start, Marko?
A lot of I think this is the most important episode we can do, because I think it will underline what it is that we actually do for a living. And you and I have not prepared or photoshopped or game, whatever it's called, this episode. We actually have no idea what each of us is going to say, and I'm perfectly fine if we disagree, of course. But I do think I'm very passionate about this thing. I'm very passionate about what it is that I do for a living. Most of our listeners know that we have a day job, although some don't and expect podcasts every day. Oh, God. So
I love it. I love it. It's great. I love that you guys expect it. Keep on, like, be the change you want to see in the world, guys.
Yeah. No, but it's like 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday. I just want everyone to know I'm barely awake, but this is when we can record, right? Because we do have very intense jobs. Jacob and I both work in finance. Jacob works in actual asset management, which means that he's got some risk under management. Myself, I advise folks like Jacob's company, everything from sovereign wealth funds to hedge funds and everything in between. And so we actually do geopolitical analysis for a practical reason. We're not professors at a university, although that'd be great. We're not pundits, and so we need to do this in order to get the markets right. We don't talk about the markets on this podcast because we want a diverse audience. And also because, well, we sell that to our clients. So we're not going to talk about what our actual market views are. So that's, we're sticking to geopolitics. And many of you like this podcast a lot. But I think you like it because it's different from everything else you hear. And the reason it's different from everything else you hear is because this is our job, trying to get what's going to happen correctly. And to do that, you really need to have an analytical process that takes your bias out of the equation. And I mean, there's books written on this. I haven't read them. So what I'm going to cook on here, Jacob, is my own approach. This is like a self-thought approach of how to eliminate bias from analysis. And the reason I say I'm very passionate about this is because if you read my book, Geopolitical Alpha, or if you read my research as a client, you will know that I really take the analytical part of this very seriously. And I would love to be like, I'm an analytical person, whether it's analyzing why the Lakers are not going to go far in the playoffs this year, or whether it's analyzing why my home country of Yugoslavia fell apart, or whether it's analyzing, like daily geopolitics. I actually think I'm only passionate about analysis. I'm not necessarily even that passionate about geopolitics as much as I am about the art of correctly analyzing an issue. So I think the way we do this, Jacob, is we each suggest like 3 to 5 things that are really critical for eliminating bias. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, let's do it. That's wonderful. And I cannot agree more with you on or I couldn't be in more agreement with you on my true passion not being geopolitics. I actually feel like geopolitics is sometimes a straitjacket for us because I'm truly an analyst and a contrarian at heart. So yeah.
Super. Yeah. So, and by the way, I just want to explain why this is important because I think most people don't understand this. So, most people, when they think about geopolitics, they think it's a way, it's like a study, it's an art, it's a science, whatever you want to call it, to figuring out how to make America great again, as an example. In fact, the word geopolitics, for a very long time, especially in academia, had very, very negative connotations. It was actually as a discipline tied to Nazi Germany. Like they took it too far. And so in political science, we don't call, like if you read political science literature from 1945 to right up like 5 years ago, the term was foreign affairs, international relations theory, and so on. We didn't use the word geopolitics. John Mersheimer was like the only person out there like wantonly using it. And part of this is this idea that somehow, you cannot like what is the perspective from which you study foreign affairs and relations between countries? Usually it's from a perspective of you working for a country or caring about a country and trying to better its future. Or in the case of Germany, like taking that way too far during the 1930s into social Darwinism kind of an idea. And the reason I mention this is that I find it curious, cousin. I find it curious that people cannot disassociate the discipline of geopolitical analysis from their own perspective. And I say that because we have many disciplines, many professions where it is essential to not be biased. For example, medicine. It's frowned upon when doctors operate on their own kin. They're not going to make the right decision. Like especially OBGYNs should never deliver a baby from their own daughter, as an example, or their wife. Like that is frowned upon. And I know this because I come from 3 generations of OBGYNs, like randomly and bizarrely, and therefore I'm a failure because I don't deliver babies for a living. As an aside. But the point is, why? Because, well, you want to make a decision that's correct medically, not passionately. Like you love your daughter, you don't really love your unborn grandkid that much. So you're always going to, like have a passionate response to the medical care you provide. Similarly, in legal profession, you can get disbarred for basically choosing not to represent somebody, or subverting their defense. Let's say you are defending a child rapist. We take it as obvious that legal professionals should defend with all their capabilities such a vile monster, right? I mean, these are the things. And yet when it comes to our analysis, I look at everything that our listeners have to consume out there. It's all pretty much biased bullshit. There's very little unbiased analysis, and we don't frown upon it at all. As humans, as consumers, as just citizens, we don't pause and say, wait, hold on a second. Like you're an US intelligence operative who still analyzes everything from a perspective of what's good for America. Like, why would that be something I consume if I want to find out where the world is going? You're obviously biased. No, we may both be American. We may both want the well-being of the US, but it doesn't mean you should consume research, even if you kind of agree with its end goal. So that's something that I find curious, that we still haven't been able to overcome this nationalism in the back of our minds and basically establish that in this discipline, you have to eliminate that bias. And that's why I think this is critical. This is the most critical thing. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's true, and I think it's difficult. And I mean, I think it's easier for you and me to eliminate that bias, not because we are not anything less than hopeful for the country that we live in. But I mean, I don't want to speak for you. In a very real sense, my Jewish background plays in here. Like Jews have been accused for centuries of being like, a fifth column within nations and not being completely loyal to the nation that they're at, which creates this like generational trauma of, the bags are always packed. Like we might have to go anytime because you never know when the current government's going to move against you. And it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. But I do think that way. So when I'm thinking about the future of this country, like I'm very aware of, some of the darker chapters in the history of this country and like where that goes for me. So there's a part of it where I don't get too attached in any meaningful way. And I come from people who, like, the reason I am alive is because my grandparents analyzed Nazi Germany before some of the others and got the heck out of there because they understood where things were going. So I cannot prove this at all, but I don't know if it's genetic or mimetic. There's something in my family tree that's like, no, you have to be able to read the tea leaves and stay in front of the thing that is trying to go get you. So when I'm analyzing things, even about my own country, even though I have hopes for my own country, like there has always been a doubt in the back of my mind about the narratives that I'm sold about my own country, because I know that narratives can quickly be shifted and that things can sort of change overnight. So I don't know. I mean, maybe, I don't know if you feel that way about your Yugoslavian/Serbian background and, having lived in Canada, been all over the place, like the country that you think of as your birthplace is no longer here. So like it sort of frees you in a certain sense to be completely unbiased about these things because you know that none of this is permanent. Like it's not going to be here necessarily in 100 or 200 years. So
yes, and I want to put a pin on that and come back to it because that's true. But I was rooting for a team that then, like moved. Like I was a Baltimore Colts fan, and now I'm just like angry at every team, and so that definitely helps me. But I think that I agree with you. I think that both your Jewishness and my lack of a nation definitely makes us very good analysts. But I also don't want to make it sound like the two of us are telling everyone else you have to have those kind of traumatic generational experiences. So like that's why I do want to come back to this, because there were some moments in my life where I definitely became an analyst. It was a defense mechanism. But I also think that somebody who just like grows up in Iowa, as our good friend and one-time boss Peter Zion did. Peter Zion grew up in Iowa. Our cousin Matt Gherkin grew up in Kansas, and I think in many ways, I respect their journey even better than mine. There's a this is a random analogy, but just hear me out. I love the scene in Blade. All right,
Yes, go on.
Blade.
Yeah.
There's this scene in
Wesley
Blade where
Snipes. Vampires.
Wesley Snipes, but this is one of the few scenes where he's not involved. And it's a scene where the bad guy, who's this vampire, is talking to his boss, who's like a 1,000-year-old vampire. And he tells him, like, I was born into this in a snobby way. Like, the old vampire who's been around forever, the old guard. He was born into being a vampire. And therefore he's like, and I always think about that. Like, I was born into this business. I was like, not only did I grow up in Yugoslavia, I grew up in Iraq in the 80s. Like, my first memory as a child is Iranian Scuds like flying over my head, like, whoa, look at that, fireworks, so like this little Marko. And then I went back to Yugoslavia, like, whew, wow, that sucked. Like, too bad for those guys and their wars. And then, like, 6 years later, like, what the hell? So my point about all this is I understand why I do this job, but I'm always impressed by people like Peter Zion, like Matt Gherkin, who did not grow up in those kind of, and so to me, their passion is almost greater than mine. I'm like that old vampire who's like a snob, basically.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you have to have that kind of generational trauma to inhabit this mind space, just that it's a switch that is maybe easier for you
I agree.
to flip on. But anybody can engage with it. And it really is just a mode of thinking. And it's funny, you and I have very different ways of flipping our switches. You bathe in nihilism. You joke about doing that all the time. I don't have as pithy a comment because I do the exact opposite. I just get all of it out really fast. I'm just like, here's all the emotion, here's all the bias, here's everything I'm thinking, and now I will try and take it all apart. I will I will get it all out of myself, and then I will look at it as if it came from somebody else, and I'll treat it with the same derision that I treat like most comments from anybody else. But you do have to have, like, whether it's Peter or Matt or you or me, like, there has to be a strategy for you to find your bias and disassemble it and put it in a bento box on the shelf, because the first and hardest part of doing it is actually admitting to yourself that you do have some kind of bias.
Go.
And
Let's
you
do
need
that.
To think about it.
I think you're ready to go. I mean, you were hesitating not to go there, but I'll go there for you. But what both of us are basically saying, is that we're fans of Ratatouille. And what's the tagline of Ratatouille? It's anybody can cook. Like, and that's very appropriate. That's what we're saying. We're not saying that we're special, I think we are. We all are. We all have our unique experiences, but I do think that anybody could cook. So let's give everyone a recipe. Look, at the end of the day, we're going to do an episode on geopolitical books. We did one on movies. We can give you the tools to kind of get the empirical knowledge up to a level where you can analyze things. But the real first thing is to figure out what does it make to be an analyst. So why don't you start? So Jacob, you adopt, as you just said. So this is your first, I think, advice, and it's a good one. It's one that's actually professionally given by psychologists, I guess, and folks who study bias. They say that the first thing to do is to become aware of it. So you take a deep breath, you let it linger in your mind, right? And so then you become aware of it, you touch it, you feel it, and then you put it on, as you said, like a bento box on a shelf.
I will literally, this is the most important part of my process, honestly. It's not just that I take a deep breath and I think about it, I write it down, whether it's typing it out or write it down. If I'm about to do a piece on Greenland, I sit down and I ask myself a very simple question. What are all the things that I believe and think about this topic that is in the news right now? Like, if I was just getting asked, like, at a party after 3 drinks, like, what would I say? Who would I make fun of? Which politician would I not like? Everything. Like, write it all down and then staple it to the wall and start from scratch. And usually the convictions that are most deeply held are the ones that I attack the first, because usually those are the ones that have the least amount of data attached to them. I find that the stronger my emotions are about something, the less I've actually thought it through, the less research I've done, the less I've actually put it through analytically. So the exercise of writing down what I think thinking about how much emotion I have attached to each one of those things, and then looking at myself really honestly in the mirror and saying, can I back that up with data? If I can, great. Then it's like, go on to the next thing. But if I can't, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go to jail, do remedial research on this thing that I passionately have this, thought about, and go back to it. And I would say like 80% of the time that I have strong emotions about something, once I actually start looking at why I think that, I realize I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And that there's a whole framework and a whole context, which is, I don't know if any of you have read my research. One of the reasons it is so sinewy and contextual is because the analysis part is the easy part. Like, it's a couple of paragraphs. It's very short. It's like, this is what I think. Most of the time, what I'm trying to do is communicate to you, hey, I went on this intellectual journey in developing this research. Here's the 10 pages of shit I didn't know about before I went into this. And I desperately want you to know it too, even though you're really only here for the 3 paragraphs that tell you what you're supposed to do or think about this thing. Anyway, now I'm rambling. For me, it's literally write down what you think about something, what you believe. Don't be afraid of what you believe. And then disprove it. Like, don't get your identity wrapped up in the things that you believe. See if you can back it up with data.
So yeah, that's a very, I think that will work for 85% of the people, you know. And I go a step further in that, and I don't mean that I do more than you do. Like, this is all very different for each one of us. Everybody says nobody can eliminate biases. This is clinically proven. This is scientifically proven. My view is that you should strive to do that. You should strive to be almost an inhumane robot when you do this job. And now that's very, very difficult. So how do you do that? And one of the ways that I do that is I use what's called empathetic analysis, which is actually used in like marketing. You're trying to empathize with the customer. Like, let me put myself in the customer's shoes. Let me have that experience so that I know what they are experiencing when I advertise to them. And my view is that, and this is something that we were taught at Stratfor by George Friedman, and he definitely believed in this. And I never felt like he had to teach me this because I came already thinking this way. So that's where that kind of snobbery comes from, that I was born into this life. And one of the things is when you live in countries where somebody's trying to kill you, you can just be angry about it, or you can adopt like this kind of analysis. Well, why is this actually happening? Let me put myself in the shoes of my enemies. And when you develop that at an early age, I think this is where I got lucky. I did develop this, what is it about the situation? Like, why does President Trump want Greenland? Let me look at it from his perspective. Let me take it seriously, and I'll give you this one case. At Stratfor, while I was working in the political risk industry, I had an intern who was a very, very right-wing, I would say unabashedly Islamophobic, young guy. We were trying to figure out what Iran was going to do, and I already knew what Iran was going to do because I did the analysis, and Iran was going to make a deal with the Obama administration. So this is before the deal was concluded, but it was during the negotiations. His view was that they couldn't possibly hold by the deal. They couldn't possibly want to do the deal. They're evil. And I was like, wait a minute, they're very rational. Here's the history of their behavior. No, they're evil. Have you read the Quran? I was like, bro, what? What the fuck? And then finally I told him, I want you to go home and I want you to think like the supreme leader. I want you to spend the whole weekend just walking around in robes, and
Daniel Day-Lewis preparing for his supreme leader.
Do some and he came back to me and he said to me, yeah, it worked. You're right. But I don't want to do this job. And then he said to me, look, I was in the Marine Corps and my best friend was killed by Shia militias. They killed him. This is documented. My best friend was killed in combat in Iraq. That's my experience. And I don't want to put myself in the body of my enemies. I want to better my country. And so I shouldn't be an analyst. I shouldn't be an analyst that objectively tries to predict the future. I should be somebody who bends that future and changes it to the benefit of the US. And I was like, yes, you're right. Awesome. Self-discovery, See ya, because you can't be my fucking intern. Bye. I wasn't that mean, but yeah, I mean, that guy was honest with himself. And this is where I want to come down. Like, to me, many people do what you do, Jacob, and I respect that. I do something completely opposite. I am a vessel for analysis. And that means that I should not have biases. And the way I strive to do this is to actually embrace anything that you think is um like even beyond acceptance. And one of the reasons to do that is to cleanse yourself of all feelings, to become numb. It's sort of kind of like eating too many hot chili peppers. You're not going to be able to taste the meal, but you've cleansed your palate to a point where you're just numb. So one of the ways to do that is empathetic analysis. You embrace like the other side. You make a case for Saruman's betrayal. Like, make a case for it. The odds of winning were too small. You want to try to have a seat at Sauron's table. Saruman was a fucking, he was a defender of human rights, bro. Gandalf and his coterie of warmongering hawks wanted to basically do a Russian style, meat grinder against Sauron's armies. And I mean, if it wasn't for bravery of Frodo, what would have happened to the West in the Middle Earth? They would have all been genocided, whereas Saruman had a plan to save humanity. Boom, there you go. And obviously, like, the point of this is to sharpen your analytical tool and to prepare yourself to make the case for that child molester effectively as a lawyer. Like, how do you defend a child molester as a lawyer in a court of law and try to get that person off their charges? I mean, that requires a level of mental stamina that can be only sharpened to this kind of empathetic analysis. So all of you listening to this, if you hate Trump and you've never given him props, you are biased and you're not ready to be an analyst. If you're a member of MAGA and you think that everything Trump does is awesome, you shouldn't be listening to this podcast, my friend, unless you're a masochist, unless you want to become an actual analyst. If you just want to be a pundit, if you just want to go through life, like cheering for your team, God bless you. Plenty of podcasts for that. This ain't it. This is a podcast where we make a case for why Saruman was right.
Well, yeah, it's really easy to do empathetic analysis about somebody like Mark Carney, if you're American. Like, the really hard thing is, can you do empathetic analysis, for example, about Vladimir Putin? And like real empathetic analysis. Can you actually inhabit the shoes? Can you think about the world and not think you're evil? Because none of these people think they are inherently evil. They think they are doing the right thing and the just thing. And you have to get your mind into that. And it's funny, you and I both have very different approaches. I know that I can't become the robot, but I do all the stuff that I do in order to get to that numb place that you're talking about with the chili peppers. So that when I do actually come across something that feels like it rings true, it's there. It's also like, I mean, this is vaguely Buddhist. Like, you have to
yes,
not to get
it's
too
very
kooky
Buddhist
about it. You have to abandon yourself. So
Yes.
many people, like, our emotions, our takes, our ideas, they become our identity, and that's one of the reasons hate mail, like, keep bringing it. It's like water off a duck's back. I don't care. My identity is not wrapped up in any of the takes that I have. My identity is wrapped up in whether I'm right, whether I get things correct, which then is a whole conversation about how you measure whether you're right or not. But
That
like,
stuff.
I could care less about somebody who writes in and says, "Oh my God, you're crazy." It's like, I know who I am. You don't know who you are. That's sad. Maybe you should
But
go walk around in the Supreme Leader robes.
But you know what, Joe Jacob? Like, I think I was the same way maybe before. The only problem with identifying with being right, the only problem with that, is that we're going to be wrong a lot of time. The reason that Kobe Bryant shot chart is behind me is because the man averaged 47% field goals for his career. But don't you fucking disrespect the Black Mamba. You know what I mean? The reason he shot such a low percentage is, yes, he was a ball hog. And yes, occasionally he did shoot inefficient jumpers, but it's also because when the shot clock was down and the triangle collapsed, you had to give him the ball. He had to take the hard shots. So I stopped being wrapped up in being right, because I also feel that when we are doing that, we often will bend our results I've actually found that you don't do that, but a lot of my friends and colleagues do sometimes really bend their results because it's important for them to be right. To me, it's important to be an analyst. And so that the Buddhism is very thick here, you know? Like I have reached a point, like, really like the people who meditate at a professional level, like they're able to literally exit their body, right? Like that is, I believe that I'm like, what? I'm going to be 44 soon. I believe at 44 years of age, I have like exited myself. And that is where my identity is wrapped up in that nihilism that I really, really think is very critical for at least for my process. So that's what I would say. That's what I'm proud of.
Well, it's one of the reasons I like the world of asset management and finance in general,
Mhm.
because you're right. Most
Yes.
people bend the results to try and get to what they said initially because we're all biased in favor of wanting to be right. Like once you create the analysis, you have the danger of falling in love with the analysis and just wanting it to be right over and over again because it's so elegant. But I am extremely fastidious about what actually determines whether I'm right or not. It's like, okay, now that I have this analysis, express it in a trade and then track it. And it's got to be binary. Like if I don't have a binary result that is like yes or no on the thing, then it doesn't actually tell me anything. So for instance, like I think I actually took a victory lap on the podcast about this a couple years ago. Remember like the depths of everybody freaking out about the European energy crisis and the Germans were going to freeze to death in winter and everything else. I was out there. I have the receipts. I wrote this like 10-page paper that was like, no, like the Europeans are fine. Like the Germans are not going to freeze at night. There's enough energy out there. Everyone chill the fuck out. The part of it that I didn't get right was I couldn't figure out the timing. And so I couldn't express it as a trade. And so I don't actually talk about it that much because I didn't actually have the tools that I needed to actually express the thing correctly. So when I say that I'm obsessed with being right, like, part of the analysis for me is now it gets really meta. I'm like doing analysis of my own analysis and trying to give myself very, very clear boxes to indicate when I'm right or when I'm wrong. And sometimes I'll be completely right on the analysis, but there was no way to express the trade. And then it's like, well, I live in the real world. So that's great. I just talked to myself really intelligently for a while, but didn't actually do anything. I wonder if somebody was out there actually actualizing it. So that gets in there too.
But it's a great point. I mean, I think the fact like working in finance makes it easier, I think, for us to do this job because our output is something very objective. But I would flip that and I would say that in 2026 and beyond, if you do work in finance, you don't have to be Jacob and Marko to have to really spend an hour and a half on thinking about bias. It's your fiduciary duty to your clients. Like you're
Uh-huh.
legally obliged to not cheerlead a particular country leader, politics, or whatever. And I find it incredible, Jacob, how many sophisticated, highly educated folks in finance who would never favor Airbus or Boeing in their portfolio do
Yep.
favor political. I mean, like, and I would blame most of my liberal clients for this in 2025. They missed a slew of trades, a slew of views, way too bearish on tariffs, way too bearish in April, because they were passionately hating Trump. Trump derangement syndrome is real, and it's real even at the highest levels of finance. So I was at this gathering of the most elite endowments in the United States of America. And I presented my view of Donald Trump. And effectively, I was like, look, Donald Trump is America first, but America last in asset performance. That's my view. I think that S&P 500 will go up, but in currency adjusted terms, you're going to, still make more money abroad. And this was like August of 24. That was not a consensus view. It was a great view. I was like, here's a cool, interesting, and one guy managing, I'm not going to say which university's endowment, but it's a big one, was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, we're facing civil war. And I just looked at him and I was like, brother, that's not your fucking job. Your job is to maximize the returns for your end user and client, which is the university endowment. Like, you can take that shit and talk about it outside over a coffee. Like in here, we're investment professionals. And he was basically denigrating my analysis because I didn't like shit on Donald Trump enough. Like I'm sorry, buddy, but you're in the wrong profession if that's what you're worried about. And everybody listening to this is being like, wow, that's insane. Yes, it is. And so I think that finance professionals, more than anyone else, are completely unprepared for what you and I are talking about here. Because for a very long time, geopolitics didn't matter for their actual day-to-day job. So they could continue to be passionate Republicans or passionate Democrats or passionate conservatives or passionate liberals or passionate Americans and still get the Boeing Airbus trade right. But when geopolitics inhibits every part of finance, including whether or not Chinese investors can buy Grindr, as was the case a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember this. This is when the tech bros woke up. When CFIUS came in and was like, no, you cannot own a dating app for homosexual men. Like China cannot have that investment. You need to divest yourself. I think it was a Chinese gaming company that bought part or all of Grindr, and they had to divest because of this. And I was at an LP event for some VC community, and I use that as an example. Like, hey man, like geopolitics now is it's not just about whether oil prices are going to go up and down. It's whether you can actually invest in a particular tech company. And so anyone who works in finance who doesn't listen to this podcast or doesn't think about their own biases, like you're not going to be an investor for too long because you're going to have a home bias and get your face ripped off. You're going to not invest in something because you don't like the president and you're going to get your face ripped off. Or you're going to keep trying throughout 2025 to find reasons to short the market because you want it to go down because you hate the president of the United States of America. Like I've seen that all throughout 2025, and that's not analysis, and that's not finance, and it's not doing your job. So I think a whole bunch of people are going to have to be updating your resume. Okay, second point. Now this one's going to be kind of weird. So for you, become aware of your biases, write them down, and then do the analysis like with those biases staring you in the face. For me, it's numb yourself. Truly numb yourself with those chili peppers. And you do that by constantly trying to think about the unthinkable. Like make the case for the other side. That's how you prepare yourself. The other thing, I'm going to say something that's kind of weird and weird and very, very weird. But I think you have to be physically fit to do this job.
Okay, Pete Hegseth, tell me more.
Yes. In mens sano corpora sano, I believe, right? What's the Latin? In a healthy body, healthy mind. I think it's really difficult to be unbiased if you cannot lower your heart rate effectively. I mean, one of the things that people say, so professionals who tend to be on your side on this, they don't want you to eating too many chili peppers. They don't want you to try to make a case for Saruman. Most professionals say, no, become aware of your biases. Like Marko's approach is too insane. Like becoming a nihilist, it's like dangerous, But the problem with that is that to do that, you need to really kind of lower your heart rate. In order to do analysis, you need, like, especially in the moment, and like you're talking about cases where you have time to put thoughts in your paper. But what if you're engaged in an argument with a crazy uncle at Thanksgiving? Or what if you, in your job, like you're trading and you have to trade on the spot?
Yeah.
And so in those cases, unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of doing your approach where you kind of like sit down, make a cup of coffee, think about these things. You have to think on your feet. And to think on your feet, I think that a level of physical fitness is very actually important for this job. And I think most people overlook that. So there's a great book, The Hour Between the Wolf and the Dog, I think it is. I'm just typing it. The Hour Between the Dog and the Wolf, How Risk-Taking Transforms Us Body and Mind. And this is a great book by a good friend of mine, John Coates. John Coates is an extraordinary person. He has 2 PhDs. One is in finance or economics, and the other one is, I think it's in like physiology or something. I don't know what it is. And it's an extraordinary book. And he basically talks about this idea that, you have to control your testosterone and cortisol levels, and that, day traders especially have to have a certain level of fitness in order to respond to these stresses correctly. But I would extend that further. that if you want to do this job professionally, like when you are not in top shape, you're not going to make the best decisions. And I would say that the two biggest failures of me, we can sit here on the podcast, talk about our great calls all the time. But my two worst calls in my life, not taking COVID seriously enough, although that helped me later. On March 23rd, 2020, I told my clients, buy and don't look back, and was maniacally bullish in 2020. But I wasn't bearish enough in February. And then same exact thing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where I also missed that too. Gave it way too low probability, just because I thought it would be stupid to invade Ukraine and Russia would get its ass kicked, as it effectively was. But in both cases, there were things in my life that were happening at that time that threw me off my game, for whatever reason. Don't want to go into what happened in my life at the time, but it was really bad. Like the worst thing you can imagine. And when that kind of stuff kind of happens, you are off your game. And so I think that that's the other thing. Now, that's not necessary for most of our listeners. Like if you just want to get better at like thinking about the world, it's about identifying your biases. It's about feeling them. It's about empathetic analysis. Do you have to go on the treadmill every day? No, you don't. You should probably do that for your cardiovascular health and cholesterol. But the point is, if you are engaged in any way in geopolitical analysis professionally, like in the case of our investor, then it's the same thing as day trading. You're not going to be good at controlling your emotions if you are not physically fit.
Yeah, physically and emotionally fit, which you sort of alluded to as well.
Yes.
I agree with this 1,000%. And you and I are not athletes, but like we're brain athletes. Like if I like get into a fight with my wife before I like over the phone, before I go on stage to give a speech, I'm going to give a shitty speech.
Angry speech. Yes.
It just doesn't work. So you have to, which actually goes back to what I'm talking about. I actually find that once you do the exercise of writing down your biases, you can speed it up enough so that like you can do it in real time, and you can do it you could do the mental math inside of your head. But part of that is also being really honest with yourself about how you feel in your body and how you feel in terms of your own emotional health. If you are not like, or I shouldn't say you, like, you can go back and look at my own podcast, the Jacob Shapiro podcast. My dad passed away almost 2 years ago now, and I did an episode about him when he did it. And I knew not to do analysis for 3 to 4 months after the fact. I knew that I just wasn't in shape. I canceled speaking gigs. I said, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just not here right now. Like, I can't respond to you. I'm numb in a non-chili pepper way. And I just couldn't do it. And ditto that with, physical stuff is kind of harder. But yeah, like one of the hardest things to me about traveling is I try to eat good, and I try to get on the frickin' elliptical or whatever it is at the shitty hotel that I'm staying at for the event. Because if I haven't got some endorphins in my head, and if I'm not getting out some of that energy, the talk is going to be lazy, or my brain is going to be lazy, and I'm not going to be able to pick up those connections. This also, last thing I'll say about this goes to something that it was Roger back from our Stratford days who told me this. And apologies to the old people I'm about to shit on, but like geopolitics is a young person's game. Like you and I are at the peak of our powers right now. We're young enough that our minds are flexible to look at things in real time and be that trader personality. We can change our minds. We can be nihilistic. We can throw things out on a dime and then learn something new. We've also been around long enough that we have some historical context, and those two things smush together in our analysis, and we can produce ideas that are cool. If you're too young, you have no experience. So when I was 22-year-old intern nipping at Peter's heels, I was an asshole. I thought I knew everything, and I didn't know shit because I hadn't been out in the world at all. But also, when you're 60 or 70 and you're still trying to cook on, I'm a geopolitical analyst, I know that if I'm out there when I'm 60 doing geopolitical analysis, that means I'm just trying to cash the checks, because I know that there's a shelf life on how long I can actually do this, because I need a certain level of physical fitness and emotional like health in order to do these things. And I find that like the peak of your powers there are like 30 to 50. That's like when you're going to be at your best as an analyst, which is one of the reasons, by the way, I try to be so prolific. I know that if I don't use it right now, I'm going to lose it. I'm not going to be out here at 51, draining jumpers like I am at my current position.
Well, no, and that's why I'm very passionate about this, because I do want, when I'm in my 60s, to be teaching this.
Exactly.
not political science. I want to be teaching how to do analysis, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. My book says many things, but if you really see, the book does steer towards this point. Like, you have to get beyond biases and you have to actually become an analyst. By the way, for your physical fitness routine, do you do 47 push-ups every day?
No. I mean, we could do a whole episode on our fitness routines, but I've done
Pete,
all of my almost
Pete Hegseth,
95.
baby.
I
Let's
know, Pete
go.
Hegseth. What an idiot. Pete, I don't think that all the 47 push-ups is going to make up for all the cocaine and other things that you've been doing in the background in your
No,
life.
wait, whoa. How do you think I get to 47 push-ups, baby? Come on, let's go. This chest doesn't, build itself.
I don't think that many people are going to listen an hour and 1 minute in. Let me remind me to tell you the story sometime about how George challenged me to a push-up contest, and he pushed me pretty far. I won, but it was a little dicey there. He was like,
it was kind of a trick, one-trick pony there. He got obsessed with bench presses, but we'll leave that aside. But look, I think this brings up another thing. I do cleanse myself of one bias. I truly do not think I have biases in terms of politics, values, or nations. Like, I've managed to fix that stuff. But one bias I have had, and it's cost me in analysis, is framework, methodology. I was in academia long enough to become a nerd and to think that my way or the highway. And so I wrote a whole book on the constraint-based framework. And I'm sure that a lot of my fans listening to this were expecting, an hour into this conversation, that I would have already brought up the constraint framework. The constraint framework is really useful in training you to not think in biased terms. Because what you basically do is you get out of the policymaker preferences, out of their mind, out of their value systems, and you focus on the material constraints, what Karl Marx called the materialist dialectic, which I do believe as a starting point for any analysis is superior to anything else. It basically means, like, we want to find out what Jacob Shapiro is going to do today in his day. I don't want to know what Jacob wants to do. I want to know where his wife is. Does she have a shift at the hospital? Are his kids sick? Like, I don't give a fuck what Jacob actually wants, quite frankly. Like, zero fucks given about what Jacob wants to do on a Sunday, okay? Because he's recording a podcast at his 8 a.m. and then it's going to be wife, kids, maybe then Jacob, right? And so this is exactly...
By the way, I don't think you can hear the 3-year-old screaming every so often in the background, but she is here.
She is here, yeah. So, like, so I do believe that my framework is superior than all other frameworks. However, it's not the only framework. And what got me into trouble, particularly with the Russia-Ukraine war, was my framework. It doesn't bat 100%. And by the way, like, if it did, that would make me like God, and I'm not. So what's interesting about this, Jacob, is as I got older, I became more open to not just other frameworks, but understanding, like, bro, it's what you said in your book. You didn't say it's a theory. There's literally a passage in my book where I'm saying this is not a theory. This is not even a methodology. This is just a framework. It's a starting point. It's like sketching. Oh, I don't like the sketch. Let me do another one. Let me think. Maybe this time Putin really is crazy. Like, doesn't matter. The point is, that's what I do, Jacob. When you say that you list out your biases, when I list out my biases, it's like, hey, just be aware. Your framework does bat 10 out of 10 on a long enough of a timeline. In the long term, material constraints are undefeated. But in the short term, and the short term could be like a year, you may very well be wrong. And so you got to really kind of understand this and feel it and embrace it. So that's one of the things I would say as well. Be aware of what is it that you like to talk about? If you're somebody who thinks that, what is it, quo vadis, or like who pays? Like where's the money? If you're one of those people who thinks that monetary gain runs the world, like, just be aware that you always think that, and maybe this time it's cultural, maybe this time it's about ideology, or things like that.
Yeah, you and I both got the Russia-Ukraine war wrong, and we got it wrong for different reasons. I got it wrong because I actually, like, I have a piece from 2017 or 2018. It's a wonder. I called it the second partition of Ukraine. It was all about like comparing Ukraine to Poland from the 1700s or whatever, and how Russia was eventually going to take portions of it. But then I didn't think Putin was going to attack Ukraine, to the point where at the asset management side of things, we were investing in Russian equities based on what I was saying. And the reason I got caught in that rabbit hole was not because the framework was wrong. It was because I ignored the framework because I knew some analysts in Moscow, because I'd been there for 2 years in a row speaking at an event, and they told me, there's nothing going on here. Like, it's all politics. And I convinced myself that, I'm special. I have these Russian analysts and they're speaking to me and they're telling me the real thing. So like, this is of greater value than my thing. So like, another thing to just like, don't listen to people. Like, trust your work, do your work. Like, don't feel special just because you talk to someone, because I did that, and that was why I got Russia Ukraine wrong. So,
By the way, I just showed my lack of classical education. It's qui bono.
oh yeah, okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah, quo vadis is where are you going? But yes, speaking
It's all
to
Latin
people,
to me.
yeah. Speaking with people is very, very dangerous. We all have a friend in administration, or many friends. I tend to not. I mean, look, I treat all policymakers like cockroaches in a laboratory. They're subject of examination. They are not to be used as sources of information. So my research is not driven by intel from policymakers. But policymakers occasionally will say things to me that I will take seriously as a, like, again, they're subjects of
input.
examination. They're subjects of examination. That's it. And I would say that most of the people that we compete with, especially those who are older in this industry, are the opposite. All they are is just whisperers of rumors from smoke-filled halls. They're not analysts. I'm passionate about analysis. I'm an analyst, and I want to create other analysts in this world. I want to bestow upon them this framework, because I think that just relying on your Rolodex, that shit doesn't cut it. And it doesn't cut it because it does not work. There are many examples in my book that I go through where people in finance lost a lot of money because they all bet on the same side of the same issue, because they were talking to the same people with the same idiotic like networks. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. So that's another one. Now I'm going to go into some other kind of esoteric ones. Obviously, staying in physical shape is probably not what many of listeners thought we would talk about on a biased podcast. Only send data and only bookmark stories. Only email your friends or text your friends with stuff that does not help your view.
Mm-hmm.
And this is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is very dangerous. We learned this also at Stratfor. Every time we would pat ourselves in the back, George Friedman would come and just shit on us, which I appreciated greatly.
Which he was very good at.
Yeah, he was very good at that. But I mean, it also taught me that, you want to really, like, if you're right, you're right. Move on. If you're wrong, or if there's a possibility that you're wrong, get your antenna up. So people ask me, what do I read? I read shit that's weird. That doesn't make sense. I will click on a Reuters story or a Bloomberg story or a whatever story that doesn't fit some framework or some idea or some analysis, because it's just like, this is out of place. This shouldn't be happening. This doesn't help my view. And so now this isn't actually always true. And my colleagues listening to this will be like, wait, you just sent an email yesterday about how like Europe is integrating. Yeah, I know. I'm working on it. But this is what you should strive to. Sometimes,
also, we have day jobs. Like, we do have to take the victory lap every once in a while, so you all know we exist. If we were perfect monks about this, we would be like, like writing to an audience of 5.
Yes, that's right. We wouldn't be paid. But no, I think that's another one. Get your antenna up. And this also goes back to another very vanilla. Like, if you Google how to avoid bias, one of the things will be like, expand your social network, expand your social circle, and read stuff you don't like. Like, if you are liberal, go on Breitbart. If you're liberal, here's something, a homework for everyone on this podcast listening. If you're liberal, go on foxnews.com every day.
Yeah.
Just look at the headlines.
Yeah. Or when it's election night, force yourself to turn on Fox, not the thing that actually confirms what you think.
And similarly, if you're conservative, like pick up a copy of The New Yorker. And by the way, you know what's going to happen if you do? You're going to read like a 17-page on, baking bread, and you're going to be like, wow, this is pretty good. Yeah, this was good. Okay. I got two more. I don't know if you.
I want to add one more thing to what you said.
Yes, please.
I want to add one thing quickly to what you said, and I can also hear my children are devolving, so we may have to either.
I'll go very quickly on the last two.
But I just want to say, like, I often don't read other analysts to this point. Sometimes people ask me what podcasts I listen to. I don't listen to other people's podcasts.
None. Except Bill Simmons, God bless him. Peace be upon him.
Sometimes people ask me, did you see that thing that Peter said or that thing that Marko said? No, I didn't see it. Because as soon as I read it, I'm going to be like, that's good. I'm going to put that in my shit too. So like, it's very much like George was the one who taught me this. Analysis is a lonely profession.
Very.
You have to be alone. You're out on the island by yourself, thinking about things. Like, there's no feedback. You're not looking for chums to like be analysts with you. It's like, no, you have a take, and you, like, to your point about emotional and physical fitness, like, you don't want to pollute your takes with other people's takes. You have to have your own takes, and you have to have enough self-confidence to be cool being alone in your takes and not having that constant feedback loop, which again is inhuman. Basically, to be an analyst, don't be a human being.
No. I think there's a better analogy here, and I agree with you. I use the word contaminate. Like, my job is to produce original research. My job is to produce, like, I'm not here to like contaminate my process with other people. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that I have to have an original take. And then after we can compare. I'm a chemistry guy. I'm an esprit de corps guy. My management style is I want to make my people happy. I really believe that Phil Jackson is the greatest coach in the history of basketball because he understood the chemistry. The thing is, we don't play basketball for a living. It took me a long time to realize that we're in a baseball team. Yeah. In a baseball team, you got to have your own process, because you're not really playing a team sport. You're playing an individual sport that's played in a team game. And I think that is where I agree 100% with you. We're the same on that one. I know we're going to do this short. You're time constrained. And it's 6:22 a.m. on a Sunday over here.
Yeah, you need to go have some fun.
Two really quick ones. If you cannot laugh at what's going on in the world, you're already fucking lost. You should not be listening first and foremost to this podcast. You're going to get insulted because we're going to make fun of serious shit. Mm-hmm. But it also means that you cannot professionally do geopolitical analysis. If you're one of my clients who says, like, I didn't find that funny, or you're one of my clients who says, like, well, hold on a second, that's a serious matter, you should not pay for my research. You should cancel it.
Ding, ding, ding. There's your bias. Like, go interrogate that a little bit. If you don't think the joke is funny, like,
I think if you're in your 50s and you have that reaction to something I say, you're, like, too far gone, honestly. I don't think you can be salvaged. And you will be out of a job. You know what I mean? You'll be out of a job. You won't be able to pay for my research in about 12 to 18 months, brother.
Exactly. But if you're trying to become an analyst, if we're making a joke and it like doesn't land, like ooh, like
okay.
When I find something not funny, that's a really good sign that I need to think about like why I don't think it's funny.
It could also be that it was a bad joke. I will admit to that.
It could, but geez, 1 out of every 100 doesn't land, right?
But so that's one of the things. And what I would say is use humor yourself. Like, use humor. Now, that works for me, not for everyone else. I understand that. But I do think that it's kind of hard to keep your brain in mental shape.
Well, yeah, there's actually two levels to that, because it's about keeping your brain in mental shape. But, we're analysts. But if you're an analyst in the middle of the forest and you can't communicate, you haven't done anything. So the other part of what we have to do, ironically, is communicate. And analysts are not good communicators. And I mean, several studies have shown that the way to prime an audience to trust you is to make them laugh first, which is why the hardest part of every presentation I give is how am I going to get the laugh in the first 2 minutes so that I can open up these people's brains to hear the thing that I want to tell them that they don't want to hear, that is going to make them uncomfortable. So there's also you have to be funny because that's the only way you're going to get people to listen to you. So.
Yes, and that's important. I mean, I think most good analysts feed off of that negative reaction. You almost want it, especially if it's from both sides. I mean, George, of course, famously would with glee he would have a giddy smile on his face when he would get hate mail because he said
Yeah.
one of my favorite pieces he wrote was that Obama would conduct a foreign policy exactly like George W. Bush. And a hate mail from both conservative and liberal readers was like, and he was just like a fire hose. Give it to me. Yes. And I think that's one of the things that we definitely find commonality with George. The final thing I want to say, and this is kind of weird, but throw your passions. Like I am human. Okay. When I'm behind my desk doing this job, I'm inhumane. Like I'm brutal nihilist. But I have kids, I have passions, and I embrace my humanity. But how do you then have passion if you don't have it for what you do 12 hours a day? Embrace it in non-market relevant, non-geopolitical relevant endeavors. So, patriotism is a personal choice, but when it impacts your asset allocation as an investor, you're in huge trouble. So you can shift your passions into something else. I shifted my passions as a very young kid. Like I had to go through trauma of the country that I totally bought in. I was like any other human being, proud of my country at 6 years old. And that country collapsed. And I swear to you, Jacob, and for all of you out there, now it's going to all kind of come together. But I threw my passions behind the Lakers. I'm not even kidding. And I know a lot of my clients know I'm a huge Laker fan and all that stuff. But one of the reasons that I am, and I've realized it like kind of post facto, is it helps me put all my passion eggs into one basket, and it's an irrelevant one. Like nobody cares that Marko can't analyze. I actually pride myself on analyzing Lakers well because I, shit on my team all the time. But
I pride myself on analyzing basketball terribly. It's an art form how terrible my takes have gotten.
But my point is, it's like put passion into your daughter's soccer team. Put passion into your kid's ability to play the piano. Like there are many things in life where you can be passionate and you can be biased and you can cheer for your own team. It doesn't have to be in things that impact your profession. Yep. And again, if you're into geopolitics for fun and you just want one country to win, one country to fail, hey, that's cool. You can still listen to us. It'll be funny. You get angry when we're, I guess, not praising your dear leader or some shit. But like the point is, if on the other hand, you do this professionally, you can fill your cup with passion in things that don't impact your job. So find something to be passionate about. Find a English Premiership League team, preferably one that keeps losing. Become a Queen's Park Rangers fan. Become a Clipper fan, whatever it is, so that you can be passionate and you want to really focus on that issue. That helps because then you don't have that passion for other. You're out of passion. You're like, in your 40s, man. If you're passionate about everything, something's wrong with you. And so, like, that's a way to kind of do this as well.
No, I agree. I agree 1,000%. I mean, I've gotten more bored with sports lately, but you have to find things to put that passion into. It's why I'm such a prolific trash talker when I do play pickup basketball. It's why I'm trying to build an organic farm on my dad's old property, like going down that rabbit hole. Like you need things to do. It's, the most common question I think both you and I get advice from people who want to get into this industry. So for those who are listening and are like in college or young and thinking about how to become an analyst, they're like, what should I read? What should I do? It's like, just live, man. Like just have some really rich life experience. That's going to give you way more than Econ 101 at like any college. Like I didn't take Econ 101. I'm sure you probably took Econ 101 at some point, but like understand actually like what it means to be poor is a lot better than taking Econ 101 if you want to understand these things.
But that's a paradox, I think, too. The paradox is that most people who want to get into this business are passionate about geopolitics, but they're passionate about geopolitics for the wrong reasons often.
Yeah.
And if you are just really passionate about like your country succeeding in the world, you should join the government, the intelligence, the foreign ministry, the State Department, whatever it is. But you're not a geopolitical analyst. You're not, and there's a difference about being passionate about geopolitics and being passionate about being an analyst. That's, for example, you can, like, I think most great basketball players are fans of the game. For sure, but they're passionate about being a basketball professional player.
Yeah.
Not about like they're not watching a game between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Clippers on a random Tuesday because they're fans of the game. They're watching it as an analyst. How do I become better? Oh, I want to watch Giannis being defended by someone under 6'5". Like, that's an interesting. Oh, look at what he does. He doesn't have a post game. Got it. Like things like that.
It's why, like Kevin Durant, LeBron James, like listen to them talk. They're actually basketball analysts.
They're basketball analysts. More than fans. Okay.
All right. Sorry to cut it short, y'all, but that's I've got screaming children in the back.
God bless you, brother.